In this video, we're going to look into how to set up a render sequence within Maya. Now that we have our mechanical arm and it's animated, we have the constraints, and we went into the curve editor and we added a little bit of interest to our animation. Okay, so one of the first things you do is basically set up a camera to which everything's going to be looked through. Alright, so I already kind of created a camera for my scene. I have it right here. Now the one thing about this view is that it's not technically what it's going to be rendering. Okay, so in order to kind of get a real preview of what you're actually going to be rendering, you need to make sure you turn on your resolution gate. And again, there is a shortcut right here, which is this symbol, this blue circle right here, or you can go to view, camera settings, and resolution gate. Okay, this gives you basically an idea of what you're going to be seeing in your render. Okay, and also tells you how big it is. Now as you can see, this camera, it's kind of looking outside of this kind of planes that I created to be the background. So that's why I also created a bookmark, so I can actually kind of bring it back to where it's supposed to be. But let's just kind of change this camera angle a little bit right here, make it a little bit more interesting. Alright, so again, this is kind of completely up to you. Oh, I can just leave it as it was. I think that's just fine. Okay. Alright, so this is basically what we'll be seeing in a render. Now the next thing you need to do, it's basically go into your render settings, and again, this is the shortcut right here, this button. We're gonna have to make a couple changes here. The first thing you want to look into, it's basically to where these files are being saved to, and by default they should be, the sequence will be saved within your image folder. Okay. So I suggest that you go before you do a batch render, you go into edit and change the project imagery image directory. Alright, and by going into edit, it's going to open the project window. Alright, and to change the location to where this is going to be saved to, click on the folder that's right next to the images and the box right here. Okay, and this is going to open a new window, and it's going to prompt you to pretty much tell Maya what it is that you want to save this to. So if you still want to keep it within your images, you can just open your images folder and create a new folder. We'll call this one sequences, or let's just call it mechanical arm render. Okay. And again, that's kind of completely up to you what you call it. Once you have the folder, just select it, and you're gonna see that next to the images is going to tell you that it's going to render within the images folder inside the ma_render folder. Alright, and then I'm just going to click on accept, and it's going to close. So when we look under common, the first thing that you're going to see here is basically where it is that's going to be saved to, and again, it's telling me that it's going to be saved in the directory that I just created. The next thing I want to do set up is the file output. Alright, so we want to give a name to our renders. I already have something here. It's called MA for mechanical arm. You need to select the image format. Again, for the sake of efficiency, I'm selecting a JPEG, but you probably want to do something that's a little higher quality. Usually a PNG will be something more desired, because again, the compression is not that bad on this one. You're going to retain better quality on this. Now, by default, Maya under frame / animation extension, it says name single frame. Alright, if you want to do a sequence render, click on this and select one of these options that allow you to have the name, which will be what you have under the file name prefix, plus some sort of kind of way for it to organize it. I like to use name underscore number and point extension. Alright, so what it means is that it's going to name each image MA underscore, and then it's going to give it a name, number, sorry, and then it's going to be dot PNG or JPEG or whatever it is that we choose to have for the render. And again, I'm using JPEG just because it makes it quicker, but I suggest you use something that keeps the quality of your image a little better. So something like PNG or Targa will probably be a better choice. Now from here, from the file output, I want to jump into the frame range. So this is you basically telling Maya from what frame to what frame you want to start rendering. In this case, I want to do from frame 1 to 120, okay, and which is the length of my animation. Under renderable cameras, you need to by default it's usually going to be in perspective. You need to make sure you change that into the camera that you created. In this case, I'm also going to check off the alpha channel because I don't want to mask for this, because again, it is that type of thing kind of takes a little bit longer. Under image size, you need to select the image size of the render. I'm just using a preset 640 by 480, and you have a bunch of different presets here that you can use in case that's not what's required for your project. So I'm just going to stick to that. 72 is usually pretty good resolution, but you can always change that to something else if you need it to be. The next thing, before we move on from the render settings, is to make sure we go into Maya software, and we got to make sure we change the quality from preview quality, which is usually what's the default, into production quality. Alright, and we're just going to leave that at this, okay? Then alright, so I have the directory where this is going to be saved. We already named the images, okay, and we know the number of frames that we're going to be rendering, the camera that is going to be rendered through, and the size of it. And we also change this to production quality to make sure that it doesn't give us that preview kind of jagged look, okay. The next thing that I'm going to do is change the Maya mode that I have here. We're working under animation. I'm going to switch to rendering, okay? And under rendering, I want to go to the render tab here, and I'm going to go into batch render. I'm going to click on the box to see the options, and I'm going to click on batch render and close. Alright, so then we're going to give Maya a second, and we should start seeing some announcements here in this box as it starts rendering. Alright, but it's literally going to start rendering frame by frame, okay, and it should give us some results in a couple seconds, okay. Okay, so as you can see, it's kind of telling us basically the percentage of how far it's rendered the image, and then it's telling us what frame it's doing and where it's being saved to. Okay, so you basically just gonna have to sit and wait until Maya's finished with this, and again, depending on what you have here, it could take a couple minutes. If I go into my project directory here, and if I go into my images folder under MA_render for mechanical arm render, we're seeing that each one of these frames is being rendered by Maya, alright, and then placing them into this folder. Okay, so once this is done, and again, I've kind of went ahead and did this because again, this is going to take a little bit, even though it's not that intensive. Once you're done with this, open up Again, I'm using Adobe After Effects, and this is CS3, but what I'm about to show you would work for any version of After Effects. You're going to go into File, Import, click on File, and then you're going to find the directory of the sequence that you just rendered. And again, in my case, it's going to be found under okay. Now this is only going to work if when you select it, you need to make sure you this JPEG sequence, and again, I'm doing JPEG just because it's faster here, but I recommend you use something of higher quality. Make sure that's checked on, and then click on Open. Alright, so it should bring the sequence of 120 images into your After Effects. Alright, and I'm just deleting something that I had there previously, and you should have it right here, and it should be the prefix of your name, underscore, and then the sequence of images. So within this sequence, you're going to find 120 frames that were rendered. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is bring this into a composition. You can do this in a couple ways. I'm just going to select it, left mouse click, and just drag it into this non-composition here. And by doing that, After Effects is going to create a composition for us. Alright, then once we're here, if you want to see a preview of what your animation looks like, you can go into your time controls and just click on this button, which is a ramp preview. Okay, this is basically the animation that we just created. Alright, it's just gonna kind of loop around and make sure that it's playing correctly and things like that. So now that we've seen a preview of the animation and everything's working fine, it's time for us to output this into a different format. So to do that, I'm going to go into composition at the top of the menu. So composition, add to render queue. Alright, when you do that, it's going to give you a new tab right next to the sequence that you render, called render queue. And here at the bottom, you're going to see the settings for this render. So again, this is kind of really dependent on what your kind of project calls for. Usually the render settings I leave as it is. Alright. The output mode, I'm just going to click on lostness and make a couple of changes here. I'm going to change this into a QuickTime. Under format options, I'm going to make sure that it's at H264. Okay. And okay, and this one doesn't have audio of anything, so I don't need to kind of check on any of this, and I can just press OK. Alright, and then under output 2, I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to tell Maya where I want to, After Effects, where I want to save this. So I'm going to go into my desired location. Alright, and I can go into movies here and just click on save. Alright, and once I have that, then all I have to do is come here and click on render. And this shouldn't take that long, since again it's not a very long sequence. And again, it's taking less than a minute to play correctly. To render, sorry. Now, another thing that we might want to check before we render this, and again, remember that when we set up our project settings, we wanted to create an animation that was at 24 frames per second. Now, one thing that I neglected to to check here on my composition is to make sure that that composition was set up at 24 as well. So I'm going to select my composition here under my project tab and go into actually, where is this? Composition settings. Alright, and again, we're going to see here that the frame rate for this was at 30 when but the sequence that we created was at 24 frames per second. So it might not render correctly unless we actually change this. So again, we probably want to make sure that we go back and change that. And now that it's at the right frame rate, we probably want to give it another render. Okay, but again, just before you render, just make sure you have the right frame rate by making sure by going to composition settings and finding the frame rate over here. Okay, and then just kind of render it out. Again, in this video we covered how you go about in your render settings and set this up to be a batch render, so it renders a sequence. And then we went into After Effects and we brought in our image sequence, created a composition, and used the render queue to actually render QuickTime H.264 output of our animation. Alright, and this concludes this video.